Orochimaru's relationship with his own body is the most medically disturbing element of a character who is already defined by transgression against biological limits. Orochimaru's primary ambition, learning every jutsu in existence, requires a lifespan that no human being possesses, which led him to the forbidden immortality technique, a method of transferring his consciousness into a new host body every 3 years, shedding the old one before it degrades past usefulness. The vessel he occupies at any given point is not a corpse. It is a living person whose own consciousness has been suppressed and overwritten, whose body now serves as temporary housing for someone else's ambition. The rotting quality that the series presents in Orochimaru's current vessel during the Sasuke retrieval and Sasuke training arcs reflects what happens to a body that is being occupied by a consciousness whose chakra and techniques are incompatible with normal biological function at the cellular level. The vessel decays around him. It becomes less functional with each passing month of occupation.
The arms that Hiruzen sealed during their fight, removing Orochimaru's ability to perform hand seals using his own arms, accelerated the decay, because the physical limitation forced Orochimaru to operate the vessel at a level that exceeded what remaining function allowed. He transferred to Sasuke's body as a contingency and was rejected by Sasuke's Sharingan, which sealed him inside his own cursed seal. The fate of existing in a body that is actively deteriorating around you, that cannot be surrendered because the next transfer has been disrupted, is the specific horror the series constructs for the moment Orochimaru's plans fail.
Baragan Luisenbairn was the original king of HUECO Mundo, the ruler of the Hollow World before Aizen Sosake arrived, conquered it, and installed himself as its new sovereign. Baragan's position before Aizen's arrival was not one he had achieved through alliance or politics. He had become the king of HUECO Mundo by being the most powerful Hollow present, by outlasting or defeating everything that challenged him across what appears to have been centuries, and by reaching a state where nothing in HUECO Mundo could threaten him because nothing could approach his ability. His resurrection form, Aragante, reflects what he is in its most essential sense, a being whose power is time itself, expressed as aging and decay. Everything his Gran Kaida ability touches ages at an accelerated rate until it ceases to function. Organic tissue rots, metal corrodes, flames extinguish because the material sustaining them ages past the point of combustion. There is no defense against it that involves proximity, which means every conventional combat technique becomes irrelevant once Aragante is active. What the series does with Baragan is construct his specific defeat around the one limitation his power cannot address. He cannot apply it to himself. When Hachi uses Orihime's Sunten Keshin to transport Baragan's own Gran Kaida into his body, the decay that has consumed everything he has turned it against begins consuming him from the inside. He dies from the effect of his own ability, which the series presents as the appropriate conclusion for a being whose entire existence has been defined by the application of inevitable decay to everything else.
Power's erasure by the Control Devil and Chainsaw Man is the series' most sudden and absolute removal of a character who had been built into the audience's emotional investment with enough care that the loss registers at a specific frequency. Power is a blood fiend who had been Denji's partner and closest companion across the first arc, who had gone from an entity operating purely on self-interest to something that had genuine attachment to the people around her, Denji specifically, and the cat Meowie, and by extension, the version of herself that existing near them had produced. The domestic chapters that preceded her erasure show what that transformation looked like in practice. Power asking Denji to bathe with her after the trauma of hell because she was afraid of the dark. The three of them cooking meals together, playing video games across the hours they were not fighting, building the texture of an ordinary life between people who had no template for one.
The Control Devil, Makima,
erases power not through combat in the conventional sense, but through a technique that requires nothing more than designation. She invites Power to the apartment. Power arrives at the door holding a birthday cake. The next day was Denji's birthday, and she had remembered. Before either of them can react, Makima points her finger and says the word bang. Power's torso is obliterated. Her head and legs fall separately to the floor. The birthday cake is the series' most precise articulation of what Power had become, a being whose final act before erasure was not combat, but the completion of a small, ordinary gesture of care toward a person she had decided mattered to her. The erasure removes her completely. Denji is in the apartment when it happens. He watches.
Ban's immortality in Seven Deadly Sins is the result of drinking from the Fountain of Youth, a sacred spring whose water grants the drinker an immortal body that regenerates from any damage, including death, with no limit on the number of times this regeneration can occur. Ban obtained this by entering the Fairy King's forest, where the fountain is located and guarded, and drinking from it after the guardian Elaine gave it to him to save his life, following an attack that should have been fatal. Elaine's gift of the fountain water to Ban cost her the immortality it would have provided to a fairy. The water was not hers to give, it belonged to the forest, and giving it away removed the protection that had kept the forest's guardian alive across centuries of duty.
She died. Ban lived. Ban's immortality has no apparent ceiling. He has been killed, dismembered, and reduced to states that would be permanent for anyone else, and he has regenerated from all of them. The specific horror of his immortality is not the regeneration itself, but the extended period during which it was stripped from him. The 10 Commandments removed Ban's immortality through a curse, reducing him to a normal human body, while placing him in conditions that were designed for someone who could not die. The series presents what it feels like to have spent years experiencing combat and damage at the level his immortal body allowed, and then to face the same damage in a body that does not recover. The stripping of immortality is not freedom, it is exposure. Overhaul's depowering at the end of the Shi Hasakai arc in My Hero Academia is a fate the series constructs as the precise consequence of a quirk used without regard for the people it consumed. Kai Chisaki's Overhaul ability allows him to disassemble and reassemble any matter he touches, including human bodies, at will. He used it to disassemble and reassemble Eri repeatedly across years of her childhood, using the rewind property of her quirk as she regenerated to produce a bullet capable of destroying quirks in others. Eri was not a test subject in any framework that acknowledged her as a person. She was a resource. Overhaul's tactical and organizational capability, his ability to rebuild the Shi Hasakai as a significant criminal operation, to coordinate the production of the quirk-destroying bullets, to manage the alliance with the League of Villains, was entirely in service of a plan that required Eri's suffering as its production method. The hero raid on the Hasaikai compound ends with Overhaul captured. In transit, Tomura Shigaraki and the League intercept the convoy. Mr. Compress and Shigaraki remove Overhaul's arms. His quirk requires hands. Without hands, he cannot disassemble, cannot reassemble, cannot perform any of the medical and material manipulation that constituted his entire operational capability. The series does not present this as justice in any clean sense. It presents it as the specific loss of the one thing around which his entire self-conception was organized, delivered by the people he had considered beneath him, in a moment he could not have anticipated or defended against.
DAKI'S final struggle before death in Demon Slayer is the series' most emotionally complex villain death, because it refuses to let the character end as the demon the audience has watched across the Entertainment District arc. Daki is Upper Moon 6, sharing the position with her brother, Gyutaro, and across the arc she has been presented as vain, cruel, and absolute in her contempt for anyone she considers beneath her, which is almost everyone.
the combat capability she demonstrates, the history of Demon Slayer core members she and Gyutaro have killed between them, and the specific pleasure she takes in her power, all establish a character that the series has not encouraged the audience to sympathise with. Then the decapitation.
When her head is separated from her body and she returns, briefly, to something like the child she was before Gyutaro gave her demon blood, the series shows who she was underneath everything the demon existence had built on top of it. She cries. She calls for her brother. She is, in those final moments, not the upper moon who killed 15 Hashira-level opponents. She is the child from the worst district of the entertainment district, who was burned and left for dead, and had nothing except Gyutaro. The struggle is not against the people who killed her. It is the last thing the child inside the demon has. Her brother's name, called into the dark before she disintegrates.
Kaz's infinite space exile at the end of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 2 is the most comprehensively terrible fate the series produces, not because it involves pain in the conventional sense, but because it removes every condition that makes existence bearable, while extending that existence without limit. Kaz is the leader of the Pillar Men, the original creator of the Stone Mask, and a cross-battle tendency, he pursues the Red Stone of Arja, specifically to complete the mask's intended purpose and achieve the ultimate life form, a state in which sunlight cannot harm him, and he possesses the complete biological flexibility to adapt to and overcome any threat. He achieves it. The ultimate Kaz is, within the series' established power framework, invincible. Joseph Joestar's final confrontation with him does not defeat Kaz in any direct sense. It sends him into the stratosphere on a volcanic rock formation, where the vacuum of space prevents the regeneration his body attempts from producing heat, freezing him solid. He is alive inside the ice. He cannot move. He cannot communicate. He cannot die. He is the ultimate life form, which means the one thing that could have ended his existence, the sun, cannot reach him effectively in deep space, and the freezing of his body prevents the processes that would otherwise require sustenance or produce decay. His final conscious thoughts, as the series presents them, are attempts to think of a plan. There is no plan. Eventually, the series states, he stopped thinking. He drifts. Permanently. Invincible and completely alone, in the dark between stars, for as long as the universe continues to exist. Cece's millennia torture in Code Geass is the backstory the series reveals in fragments that reframes her apparent indifference to everything around her as the specific psychological response of a person who has been alive for approximately 1,000 years under conditions that were not designed for survival. Cece, whose actual name is never given in the series, was a slave girl in medieval Europe who received her code, the immortality that has kept her alive across centuries, from a nun who had grown tired of living and found in Cece someone she could pass it to. The code grants immortality and the Geass power, but the immortality it provides is not peaceful. It cannot be surrendered voluntarily, it cannot be ended by external force, any injury heals, any death reverses.
The only release available to a code holder is to pass it to someone else who has pushed their own Geass to its absolute limit, which is a specific and difficult set of conditions to produce. Cece has been burned at the stake. She has been subjected to extended imprisonment and torture across multiple periods of her existence by people who wanted the Geass power she could grant, or who simply responded to her immortality with fear and violence. She has watched everyone she formed any attachment to die across 1,000 years. The witch persona, cold, detached, apparently caring about nothing, is not who she is. It is what 1,000 years of that specific experience produces in someone who was a child when it started,
and has had no exit from it since. Her goal throughout Code Geass is to find someone who can take her code and let her die. What she finds instead, at the series' end, is Lelouch. If you like this video, turn on the notification bell and subscribe for more.